Your decorated service as a medic paradoxically deepens this betrayal of trust, Judge Theodore Vance lectured Specialist Anya Sharma, willfully ignoring testimony on her combat trauma. Moral injury is no license for felony theft. His voice dripped condemnation as he handed down the sentence for the disputed medical supplies, 7 years imprisonment. Anya stood motionless, shock rendering her numb before the gavel fell like a guillotine. How could her service, her invisible wounds, be so utterly dismissed by justice? His final word echoed, "Remanded." We'd appreciate knowing where you're watching from today. Do you believe a veteran's service, especially dealing with combat trauma like PTSD or moral injury, should be completely disregarded during sentencing? If you stand for considering the full context and treating veterans fairly, please show support with a like and subscribe. Tomorrow's episode features an entrance that will shake this courtroom. Don't miss it. Judge Vance's sharp command, "Remanded," hung in the air, heavy and final. The bailiffs took a step towards Anya Sharma, their hands reaching out to escort her into the judicial system's unforgiving embrace. Anya herself seemed almost resigned, her brief flicker of defiance extinguished by the crushing weight of the 7-year sentence. Her shoulders slumped in the ill-fitting defendant's clothing, but before the bailiffs could take her arm, the imposing double doors at the rear of the courtroom swung open with a quiet authority that somehow commanded more attention than a violent crash would have. Every head in the room swiveled. Standing in the entranceway was General Isabella Sharma, United States Army. She was the epitome of military precision and bearing, dressed in her immaculate Class A green service uniform. The perfectly tailored jacket displayed 4 gleaming silver stars on each shoulderboard, signifying her rank. Above rows upon rows of meticulously arranged service ribbons, a silent, vibrant testament to a lifetime of dedication, leadership, and likely combat. Zone Command, perhaps including awards specific to the Army Medical Command she potentially led. Her posture was erect, her expression composed but intensely focused, her eyes sharp and intelligent, taking in the entire scene in a fraction of a second before locking onto Judge Vance on the bench. The courtroom, which had begun to rustle with post-sentencing murmurs, fell into a profound, stunned silence. Bailiffs froze. Ada Miller visibly stiffened, his eyes widening slightly. Anya looked up, her numb expression cracking as she saw her mother. Not just as her mother, but as the 4-star general, a complex wave of emotions, shock, perhaps a surge of hope mixed with deep-seated familial pain, washing over her face. General Sharma walked forward down the center aisle, her footsteps measured, precise, echoing slightly in the cavernous quiet. She stopped directly before the bar, facing the bench, embodying a different yet equally formidable kind of power than the judge possessed. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear, calm, carrying easily to every corner of the room, yet devoid of any supplication. "Permission to address the court?" Judge Vance stared down at her, momentarily speechless. Recovering quickly, his expression hardened into one of barely concealed, condescending fury. A 4-star general, a woman interrupting his court, challenging his sentence immediately after pronouncement. It was an unprecedented affront to his authority. "General," he replied, his voice tight with restrained anger, "these proceedings are concluded." "Your presence is highly irregular." General Sharma did not flinch. "My apologies for the irregularity, Your Honor. I am General Isabella Sharma, Specialist Anya Sharma." She gestured towards her daughter with a subtle inclination of her head, acknowledging her lower rank while emphasizing the familial connection. "Is my daughter. I arrived moments ago and was deeply disturbed by the sentence imposed, specifically in light of the evidence regarding her combat service and resulting psychological trauma, which seems to have been categorically dismissed." Her gaze was direct, challenging. "Therefore, I respectfully seek clarification. Was the documented evidence regarding Specialist Sharma's experiences as a combat medic treating mass casualties under fire, the clinical diagnosis of complex post-traumatic stress disorder coupled with moral injury, and the expert testimony on these matters presented during trial, given any substantive weight as mitigating factors in your sentencing decision? Or," her voice dropped almost imperceptibly, yet carried an edge that made several people shift uncomfortably, Does this court operate under the assumption that a soldier's psychological wounds incurred directly in service to this nation, are simply irrelevant inconveniences once the uniform comes off? Judge Vance's face tightened further, a muscle twitching in his cheek. He bristled at the implicit accusation of incompetence and lack of empathy, particularly coming from this unexpected high-ranking female officer, questioning his judgment on matters of service he likely never experienced. "General," he said, his tone dripping with strained formality and patriarchal condescension, "while this court respects all honorable military service, we adjudicate based on criminal actions and established law, not on service histories used. As excuses for felonious behavior, your daughter's unfortunate personal struggles do not negate the crime for which she was duly convicted. The sentence stands. This matter is closed." He banged his gavel again, a sharp, angry sound meant to be final. But the general stood her ground, her eyes locked with his, the confrontation just beginning. Judge Theodore Vance, his face a rigid mask concealing incandescent rage, gavelled the chaotic courtroom into a semblance of order, though the stunned silence that followed General Isabella Sharma's challenge felt more like a vacuum than true calm. "This court stands adjourned pending review," he declared sharply, his voice tight. "Bailiffs, proceed with the defendant." He refused to look directly at General Sharma as he swept quickly off the bench towards his chambers, leaving the courtroom to erupt in excited, disbelieving whispers. The bailiffs, regaining their composure, firmly took Anya Sharma's arms. She glanced back at her mother, a silent, complex exchange passing between them, gratitude, worry, perhaps a hint of the old friction that might exist between a disciplined general and a daughter struggling with invisible wounds. Then she was led away, back into the cold embrace of custody, her future more uncertain than ever, yet now tinged with the faintest, most unexpected glimmer of hope. Outside the courthouse, a small but growing contingent of local reporters, alerted by frantic calls from within, swarmed General Sharma as she emerged, her aide attempting to clear a path. Microphones were thrust forward, questions shouted about her relationship to the defendant, her opinion of the sentence, her unprecedented intervention. General Sharma stopped briefly, her expression composed, professional. "My daughter, Specialist Anya Sharma, is a decorated combat veteran who served this country honorably," she stated, her voice firm and clear, carrying over the clamor. "We believe the sentence imposed today fails to adequately consider critical mitigating factors related to her service. We will be pursuing all available legal avenues to ensure a just outcome. I will have no further comment at this time." With that, she moved swiftly to her waiting vehicle and departed, leaving the media buzzing with the sensational story. 4-star Army General challenges, local judge over veteran daughter's harsh sentence. General Sharma wasted no time. Her next call was to Marcus Jones, a sharp, idealistic young attorney she knew through military legal circles. Jones had served several years in the Army JAG Corps before transitioning to private practice, where he specialized in civil rights and veterans law, known for his passionate advocacy and meticulous work ethic. He listened intently as the general recounted the details of Anya's case. The questionable theft-fraud charge related to medical supplies Anya insisted were near expiry and intended for homeless outreach, the dismissal of her PTSD and moral injury diagnosis by Judge Vance, the excessively punitive sentence, and her own courtroom intervention. Jones accepted the case without hesitation, recognizing the potential for profound injustice. Their first strategy session, held via secure video link later that day, quickly moved beyond simply appealing the sentence length. "General," Marcus argued, "attacking only the sentence concedes the validity of the conviction itself. Based on what you've told me about Anya's state of mind, her service trauma, and her documented volunteer work, the core issue here might be mens rea criminal intent. We need to argue that Specialist Sharma, due to the documented effects of her combat-related PTSD and moral injury on her executive function and judgment, lacked the specific intent required for a felony theft or fraud conviction. The original trial, presided over by a clearly biased Judge Vance, failed to give this crucial element the weight it legally deserves. The legal strategy shifted to proving Anya lacked criminal intent due to her combat trauma, arguing PTSD and moral injury should be central to understanding her actions, rather than dismissed as irrelevant excuses. Do you believe the justice system adequately considers complex mental health struggles, especially service-related trauma like PTSD or moral injury, when determining guilt or criminal intent? Should the why behind an action matter as much as the action itself? Comment number 1 with your thoughts. General Sharma agreed with Carter's assessment, authorizing him to pursue this more fundamental challenge to the conviction itself. They planned to gather enhanced psychological evaluations of Anya, track down individuals from her homeless outreach work to testify about her intentions, and meticulously document the VA clinic's often chaotic inventory practices regarding near-expiry supplies. The fight for Marcus's freedom, no, for Anya's exoneration, truly begins now. If you support this legal battle that aims to bring crucial context, empathy and understanding of veterans' invisible wounds into the courtroom, please hit that like button and subscribe. But even as Marcus Jones began the process, filing the initial notice of appeal and requesting the voluminous trial transcripts and case files from Judge Vance's court, the first subtle signs of obstruction appeared. The court clerk's office became suddenly unusually slow to respond. Emails went unanswered. Phone calls were met with endless holds or vague promises that the documents were currently being compiled or required judicial sign-off from Judge Vance himself before release. It was clear Judge Vance intended to fight their appeal, not just on legal merit, but with every bureaucratic delay tactic he could muster. Facing an appeal that now threatened to expose not just his harsh sentencing, but potential flaws in the original trial itself, how would Judge Vance and his allies like D.A. Miller attempt to discredit the core of Anya's defense, her identity as an honorable, wounded veteran? Judge Theodore Vance and District Attorney Robert Miller were intelligent enough and politically savvy enough to recognize the potential power of the defense strategy being marshaled by General Sharma and her new lawyer, Marcus Jones. Framing. Anya Sharma's actions through the lens of combat trauma, moral injury and honorable service could sway appellate judges and, perhaps more importantly, public opinion, especially given the general's high-profile intervention. Their own position felt precarious. The ex parte emails Jones now possessed were a ticking time bomb, and the withheld witness statement threatened the foundation of the conviction. They needed to proactively discredit Anya herself, specifically targeting the very pillars her defense rested upon: her military service and her resulting psychological state. In a discreet meeting, likely suggested by Vance and eagerly agreed upon by Miller, who saw his conviction potentially unraveling, they decided on a new line of attack. If Anya Sharma was being portrayed as a heroic, suffering veteran, they would introduce doubt about the heroic part. Using back channels, possibly involving political operatives or even compliant individuals within Veterans Affairs networks accessible to Miller's office, they began a campaign to subtly tarnish Anya's military record. They couldn't likely access her fully sealed official personnel file easily, especially with General Sharma potentially monitoring for such breaches, but they could manufacture doubt through leaks and innuendo. An anonymous tip suddenly surfaced online, posted to a conservative veterans forum by a newly created account. The post vaguely referenced an unnamed female army medic who served in Anya's known unit and deployment timeframe, alleging instances of insubordination and difficulty following protocol under pressure. While offering no proof and naming no names, the timing and details were suggestive enough for those following Anya's case. Shortly after, a columnist known for hawkish views and skepticism towards PTSD claims published a piece in a regional newspaper. Citing sources close to the military community, the column questioned the recent trend of veterans using trauma as an excuse for bad behavior, and included a thinly veiled reference to Anya's case, hinting that her service record might contain unreported incidents or questions about her judgment during deployment. The article suggested her actions regarding the medical supplies might be part of a longer pattern of disregarding rules, rather than an isolated incident related to trauma. These weren't direct accusations backed by official records, but rather carefully placed whispers designed to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of the public, the media, and potentially even the appellate judges or their clerks who might encounter these narratives. They aim to undermine the image of Anya as a purely honorable veteran suffering solely from the effects of war, suggesting instead a pre-existing character flaw or pattern of unreliability. General Sharma and Marcus Jones became aware of this insidious campaign almost immediately. Their own media monitoring picked up the blog posts and the columnist's piece. The general, particularly, was incensed by the attack on her daughter's service she knew firsthand was performed, with courage and competence under horrific conditions. They recognized it as a deliberate tactic orchestrated by Vance and Miller, an attempt to poison the well before the appeal could gain further traction, using anonymous smears because they lacked legitimate grounds to challenge her official record. Refuting these vague anonymous allegations publicly was difficult without dignifying them or getting drawn into a messy public relations battle that could distract from the core legal issues of the appeal. Yet, ignoring them allowed the damaging narrative to fester. It was another layer of psychological warfare, demonstrating their opponents' willingness to stoop to attacking even Anya's service to her country to protect their own positions and the unjust conviction they had secured. The fight was clearly expanding beyond the courtroom, becoming a battle for Anya's reputation and the very definition of her service. While General Sharma's strategic maneuvering applied external pressure and Benjamin Carter meticulously built the legal case for appeal, Judge Theodore Vance and District Attorney Robert Miller continued their internal campaign of obstruction and character assassination. The flow of essential documents, like the full trial transcript and exhibits Marcus Jones needed for the appellate brief, remained sluggish, hampered by continuous claims of administrative processing delays and interdepartmental coordination, issues emanating from Judge Vance's court staff. Motion hearings requested by Carter were scheduled weeks, sometimes months out, effectively slowing the appeal to a crawl. Having attempted to tarnish Anya Sharma's service record, Vance and Miller now shifted focus, aiming to discredit the other crucial pillar of her defense, the legitimacy and severity of her combat-related PTSD and moral injury. They knew Carter planned to argue Anya lacked criminal intent due to her trauma. Their goal was to preemptively poison that argument by planting seeds of doubt about her diagnosis itself. Once again, anonymous leaks began to surface, channeled through the same sympathetic media outlets and online forums. Selectively edited excerpts from Anya's VA medical evaluations, likely obtained improperly through Miller's prosecutorial access or other back channels, appeared online. These snippets highlighted moments where Anya described coping mechanisms or periods of relative stability, deliberately omitting the surrounding context of her ongoing struggles, flashbacks, and triggers. An unnamed medical professional, likely someone with known conservative leanings or hostility towards mental health defenses, was quoted in a blog post questioning the overdiagnosis of PTSD among veterans and suggesting that specialist Sharma's symptoms based on the leaked fragments appeared mild or potentially exaggerated for legal advantage. The narrative pushed was cruel and insidious. Anya wasn't suffering from debilitating trauma. She was a malingerer using a popular diagnosis as an excuse for criminal behavior. This public questioning of her deeply personal struggles was incredibly painful for Anya to learn about, relayed during brief monitored phone calls with Marcus Jones from the county jail, where she awaited transfer. It felt like a violation far deeper than the initial theft accusation. Her invisible wounds, incurred in service, were being publicly dissected, trivialized, and weaponized against her by the very system that should have offered understanding, or at least fairness. The culmination of this phase of the attack came with Judge Vance's formal ruling on Marcus Jones's motion for Anya's release on bail pending appeal. In a lengthy, dismissive written opinion, Vance systematically dismantled every argument for her release. He downplayed the significance of the potential Brady violation Vance had raised concerning the withheld witness statement in Story Number 6, or the perjury evidence from story number 7's outline, assuming that thread continues. He explicitly rejected the notion that Anya's PTSD or moral injury reduced her flight risk or potential danger, echoing the leaked narratives by writing about the unpredictability associated with such claimed conditions, and stating that her diagnosed trauma provided no insulation from accountability for violating the public trust. He concluded that her felony conviction demonstrated a disregard for the law, making her, in his view, ineligible for release despite her military background or her mother's standing. Judge Vance denied David, Anya in this story, bail pending appeal, ensuring the veteran remained incarcerated, using biased reasoning that specifically dismissed the validity and relevance of her documented combat trauma. Should a judge's personal skepticism or potential bias regarding mental health conditions like PTSD be allowed to override clinical diagnoses and expert testimony when making critical decisions about bail, especially for veterans whose trauma is service-connected? Comment number 1 with your thoughts on how the justice system should acknowledge and address PTSD. Anya received the news of the bail denial with a heavy sigh. The brief hope she'd felt after her mother's intervention and hiring Marcus, now significantly dimmed. She was trapped, her service record attacked, her mental health questioned, and her freedom denied, while the wheels of her appeal turned with agonizing slowness, deliberately obstructed by the very judge whose bias was a central part of that appeal. Anya remains trapped, her service and suffering dismissed by the judge denying her freedom, while the appeal crawls forward. If you believe Anya deserves fair treatment both legally and personally, and you want to see if Marcus Jones can overcome these immense hurdles, please hit that like button and subscribe. But now, facing transfer to the harsh environment of a state prison, with her PTSD being actively used against her by her opponents, what specific dangers awaited Anya behind those walls? Would the system's neglect turn into something more targeted and dangerous inside? Denied bail and facing Judge Vance's explicit dismissal of her combat trauma, Specialist Anya Sharma was transferred from the relative predictability of county jail to the grim, sprawling reality of Oak Haven Correctional Facility for Women, a state penitentiary notorious for its overcrowding, underfunding, and woefully inadequate healthcare services, particularly for mental health. The transfer itself felt like another calculated blow, placing her hours away from her family and legal team in an environment almost perfectly designed to exacerbate her PTSD and moral injury. From the moment she arrived, Anya felt the crushing weight of institutional indifference. The intake process was brusque, impersonal. Her status as a veteran, specifically a combat medic, was noted on her paperwork, but seemed to elicit no special consideration, only perhaps a flicker of resentment or curiosity from some staff members aware of the media attention surrounding her mother's intervention. Assigned to a noisy, cramped general population block, the sudden loss of structure, combined with the constant threat assessment required to navigate prison hierarchies, immediately put her combat-honed senses on high alert, a state of hypervigilance. That was utterly exhausting. Her most pressing need was continuity of care for her complex PTSD. She immediately submitted formal requests, citing her VA diagnosis and treatment history, for access to trauma-informed therapy and consistent medication management. What she encountered was a bureaucratic nightmare compounded by systemic neglect. Weeks passed before she even got a brief initial screening with an overworked prison counselor who clearly lacked specialized training in military trauma or moral injury. The counselor offered generic coping strategies and suggested group sessions focused on anger management or substance abuse, completely missing the nuances of Anya's condition. Her VA-prescribed medications were dispensed inconsistently by prison medical staff, sometimes delayed by days, sometimes given at incorrect dosages, leading to destabilizing side effects and a resurgence of severe anxiety and flashbacks triggered by the prison environment's inherent stresses, sudden loud noises, shouting, the feeling of being constantly watched or confined. Programs specifically designed for incarcerated veterans, which existed at other state facilities, were perpetually full or not currently offered at Oak Haven. Anya felt like her invisible wounds were not only being ignored but actively worsened. by the very system holding her captive. Added to this was the low-level harassment. Some guards, likely aware of her high-profile case and perhaps taking cues from prevailing attitudes or external pressures, seemed to take petty satisfaction in making her life difficult, arbitrarily confiscating approved personal items during cell searches, denying her access to the already limited library or recreation time, making sarcastic remarks about her general mother not being able to help her now. Among the inmate population, her situation bred a mixture of resentment, soldier girl thinks she's special, and predatory interest, forcing her to maintain a constant, exhausting state of defensive awareness. While Anya struggled daily within the neglectful walls of Oakhaven, Marcus Jones was relentlessly pursuing the appeal on the outside. Blocked by Judge Vance's administrative delays in obtaining full transcripts, Marcus focused his energy on reinvestigating the core testimony that had convicted Anya. The account given by Brenda Riley, Anya's disgruntled former co-worker at the VA clinic. Riley had testified tearfully that she witnessed Anya systematically taking restricted medical supplies over several weeks, implying a calculated theft for profit. Marcus sensed something was off about Riley's overly emotional testimony and her known history of workplace friction with Anya. He filed aggressive discovery requests, subpoenaed clinic inventory logs and personnel files, and began discreetly interviewing other current and former clinic employees. After weeks of painstaking work, cross-referencing inventory logs with duty rosters and visitor sign in sheets, Marcus found the discrepancy he was looking for. Inventory records showed significant shortages of the exact same types of supplies Anya was accused of taking, occurring on days when Anya was verifiably off-duty or even out of state attending required Army Reserve training. Furthermore, he uncovered emails, obtained through a discovery request Riley's lawyer fought hard to quash, in which Brenda Riley complained bitterly to another employee about Anya receiving a commendation Riley felt she deserved, vowing to find a way to knock her down a peg. He also found 2 former clinic volunteers willing to provide sworn affidavits stating they had witnessed Brenda Riley herself improperly disposing of near-expired supplies on several occasions and had heard her make spiteful remarks about Anya's military service. The evidence was compelling. Brenda Riley not only had a clear motive to lie, fueled by professional jealousy and personal animosity, but she potentially had access and opportunity related to the missing supplies herself, and crucial parts of her testimony about when supplies went missing were directly contradicted by clinic records. This discovery didn't just poke holes in the prosecution's case. It suggested the primary witness against Anya may have committed perjury, potentially with the tacit or explicit encouragement of Ada Miller, who relied heavily on her testimony. Marcus immediately prepared a motion to supplement the appeal with this powerful new evidence, challenging the credibility of the state's key witness. It was the first major breakthrough, a potential game-changer offering concrete hope of dismantling the original conviction. Inside Oakhaven, Anya fought to maintain her sanity and safety, unaware of Marcus's discovery, but clinging to the distant hope his work represented. The contrast was stark, her daily reality steeped in neglect and quiet menace, while outside, the legal foundation of her imprisonment was finally beginning to crack. Benjamin Carter filed his supplemental appellate brief with a sense of cautious optimism. The evidence undermining Brenda Riley's credibility, her documented animosity towards Anya, the inventory logs contradicting her timeline, the affidavits suggesting her own mishandling of supplies, was powerful, directly striking at the heart of the prosecution's case regarding criminal intent. He argued forcefully that this newly discovered evidence, combined with the previously ignored context of Anya's PTSD and moral injury, warranted immediate relief, likely a new trial. The reaction from District Attorney Robert Miller's office was swift and ferocious, clearly indicating they, along with Judge Vance, recognized the threat this new evidence posed. Miller's team filed lengthy, complex counter-motions seeking to exclude Carter's findings entirely. They argued Riley's personal feelings towards Anya were irrelevant character assassination attempts and inadmissible. They claimed the inventory logs were unreliable or misinterpreted. They attacked the credibility of the former clinic volunteers, who provided affidavits, demanding lengthy depositions designed to intimidate them and pick apart their statements. Investigators from Miller's office even paid visits to these volunteers, asking pointed questions about their motives for coming forward now, subtly reminding them of the potential legal hassles involved in challenging official testimony. It was a full-court press, aimed at burying the truth about Riley's potential perjury through procedural warfare. While Carter battled these legal obstructions, the retaliation against General Isabella Sharma escalated, moving into the official channels of the military structure itself. An anonymous detailed complaint was formally filed with the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. The complaint meticulously, though misleadingly, alleged that General Sharma had misused government resources in support of her daughter's civilian legal defense. It cited specific, though likely out of context, instances of phone calls made from her Pentagon office, emails sent via her official account related to coordinating with Carter, even if purely logistical, and suggested she had improperly utilized official duty time or travel related to Anya's case. It even hinted she might have exerted undue command influence by tasking subordinate staff with research or assistance related to the civilian legal matter. General Sharma received formal notification from the Army's Judge Advocate General's office that an IG investigation had been opened based on these allegations. While she knew the accusations were largely fabricated or distorted, a formal IG inquiry is a serious matter for any officer, let alone a four-star general. It required her immediate attention, the assignment of legal counsel through JAG, mandatory, cooperation involving interviews and potential audits of her communications and schedules, consuming valuable time and emotional energy. It cast a potential shadow over her command and her previously unblemished 40-year career. The timing was clearly not coincidental. It was a calculated blow designed to distract her, drain her resources, damage her reputation within the military hierarchy, and pressure her to perhaps force a resolution in Anya's case to make the IG investigation disappear. Just as Anya's legal appeal gained potentially decisive ground by exposing the likely perjury of the state's key witness, a formal career-threatening complaint was launched against General Sharma, likely as direct retaliation orchestrated by Judge Vance's allies. Is it ethical or acceptable for individuals within the justice system to attack the families or professional lives of those seeking justice, essentially punishing them for challenging the system? Comment number 1 with your thoughts on the legitimacy of these kinds of retaliatory tactics. The dual assault, suppressing critical evidence in court while simultaneously attacking the general's career, placed enormous strain on Anya's support system. If you're outraged by this multi-fronted attack aimed at silencing both the evidence and the advocates, please hit that like button and subscribe. You'll need to see how they counter this next. With the legal path forward obstructed and General Sharma now fighting her own battle, how would Judge Vance and his network try to definitively crush Anya's hope from within the prison itself, perhaps by twisting her own skills against her? While Benjamin Carter fought the legal battles against suppressed evidence outside, and General Sharma contended with the intrusive Inspector General investigation into her career, Anya Sharma continued to navigate the precarious existence within Oak Haven Correctional Facility. She focused on survival, keeping her head down, avoiding conflict, and trying desperately to manage her PTSD triggers in the chaotic, often hostile environment, all while clinging to the hope generated by Carter's discovery regarding Brenda Riley. Her opponents, however, were relentless, seemingly determined to crush that hope by any means necessary. Aware that the appeal regarding Riley's perjury might eventually gain traction despite their legal obstructions, and perhaps seeking to create definitive proof of Anya's supposed instability or inability to follow rules, they orchestrated a new setup, this one cruelly designed to exploit her very identity as a trained combat medic. The opportunity arose during outdoor recreation time in the prison yard, a tense space where boredom and simmering resentments often boiled over. A sudden, violent fight erupted between two inmates from rival factions near where Anya was quietly walking the perimeter, trying to get some fresh air. The fight escalated quickly, involving makeshift weapons, and one of the inmates went down hard, suffering a deep, profusely bleeding laceration to her arm from a sharpened piece of metal, possibly severing an artery. Chaos ensued. The few guards present in the yard seemed slow to react, focused more on containing the broader fight than immediately tending to the seriously injured inmate who lay bleeding heavily on the asphalt. Anya saw it happen. Years of intensive army medical training, the ingrained instinct to preserve life drilled into her under the extreme pressure of combat zones, kicked in automatically. She saw the arterial spurt, recognized the immediate life threat, saw the guards fumbling with radios instead of applying direct pressure. For a critical moment she hesitated, vividly aware of the prison rules against inmate interference, acutely conscious of being a target. But watching the woman bleed out while guards lagged wasn't an option her training or conscience would allow. Reacting purely on instinct, Anya sprinted towards the injured inmate. Using her own sweatshirt, she immediately applied firm, direct pressure to the wound, identifying the pressure point needed to slow the arterial bleeding, exactly as she had done countless times in field hospitals overseas. She shouted clear, concise instructions to another nearby inmate, telling her where to apply secondary pressure, while Anya maintained primary control. Her combat medic training took over, her movements efficient, focused, blocking out the surrounding chaos, solely intent on stabilizing the patient until proper medical help arrived. Her intervention likely saved the inmate's life, or prevented catastrophic blood loss, in those critical first minutes before the prison's emergency medical team finally arrived on scene. But her life-saving actions were immediately twisted against her. As the medical team took over and guards finally subdued the remaining combatants, two specific correctional officers, ones known for their hostility towards Anya, converged on her. Instead of acknowledging her potentially life-saving intervention, they roughly grabbed her arms. "Inmate Sharma," one of them barked, "Officer Riggs, what do you think you're doing? You are not authorized medical personnel. You interfered with..." Staff response and contaminated a scene. Anya stared at him, incredulous, still breathing hard, her sweatshirt soaked in another person's blood. She was bleeding out. "I applied pressure. I'm a trained medic." Riggs sneered. "You're an inmate, and you just violated half a dozen facility protocols. You're coming with us." Despite her protests, despite other inmates potentially murmuring about how she had helped, Anya was forcibly escorted from the yard and immediately placed back into administrative segregation. Within hours, she was served with a new, major disciplinary report. The charges were absurdly punitive: unauthorized practice of medicine, interfering with emergency procedures, creating a security risk during an incident, and failure to obey staff orders, for not immediately moving away when they arrived. The report, penned by Riggs and his partner, painted Anya not as a rescuer but as a reckless, insubordinate inmate who dangerously interfered with trained staff, potentially worsening the injured inmate's condition and hindering the guard's ability to control the situation. It was another blatant, malicious frame-up, twisting her life-saving skills and instincts into grounds for severe punishment. Back in the suffocating silence of a solitary cell, Anya felt a despair deeper than before. They wouldn't just let her be. They were actively twisting her core identity, her training, her instinct to help into weapons against her. It felt like a confirmation that Judge Vance's influence, or the system's inherent bias, reached even here, capable of turning an act of battlefield competence into a punishable offense. This charge, if upheld by the biased prison disciplinary board, could be devastating, adding years to her effective sentence and painting her as permanently incorrigible. Word of Anya's second disciplinary charge inside Oakhaven, this time for supposedly practicing medicine without a license after rendering life-saving first aid, reached General Isabella Sharma through an urgent, encrypted communication from Marcus Jones, who had been alerted by Anya during a brief monitored call before she was placed back in administrative segregation. The general absorbed the news with a stillness that was more terrifying than any outward display of rage. They weren't just trying to break her daughter, they were twisting her very essence, her training as a healer, into a weapon against her. Direct intervention with the notoriously insular State Department of Corrections or the warden at Oakhaven felt futile, likely to be rebuffed or used as further proof of improper interference. General Sharma recognized she needed a different strategy, one that applied pressure indirectly but powerfully, leveraging her national platform while simultaneously ensuring Anya had the best possible defense against the fabricated internal charges. First, she authorized Marcus Jones to engage, at her personal expense, a small but highly effective non-profit legal group specializing in incarcerated individuals' rights, particularly veterans facing disciplinary issues within correctional facilities. This team immediately went to work, filing appeals against the disciplinary report within the DOC's labyrinthine administrative process, gathering affidavits from other inmates who witnessed Anya's actions during the emergency, demanding access to prison medical logs to verify the timeline of the official response, likely proving its delay necessitated Anya's intervention, and challenging the credentials and potential bias of the reporting correctional officers, Riggs and his partner. While that internal legal battle churned, General Sharma executed the second part of her strategy. She accepted a long-standing invitation to deliver a keynote address at a major, nationally televised conference focused on veterans' affairs and mental health care, hosted in Washington, D.C. Her scheduled topic was broadly defined as Supporting Our Warriors, Challenges in Transition and Reintegration. Standing before an audience of policymakers, healthcare professionals, veterans advocates, and national media, General Sharma, in her crisp army uniform, delivered a speech that was both deeply personal, though carefully anonymized, and powerfully systemic. She spoke eloquently about the unique psychological burdens carried by military personnel, especially combat medics, who operate under unimaginable stress and witness profound trauma. She discussed moral injury, the complex ethical wounds incurred when service members are forced into situations that violate their core values, and how it, along with PTSD, can manifest long after deployment. She highlighted the frequent disconnect between highly specialized military skills and their application or understanding in civilian life, particularly within rigid bureaucratic systems like healthcare or criminal justice. Then, without ever mentioning Anya by name or referencing her specific legal case, General Sharma spoke passionately about anecdotal reports of veterans facing disciplinary action or misunderstanding within civilian systems for using their life, saving training in emergency situations, or being penalized because their trauma responses didn't fit neat diagnostic boxes understood by civilian providers. She called for greater cross-system education, trauma-informed care within correctional facilities, and urged policymakers to ensure veterans weren't being further victimized by the very systems meant to support or rehabilitate them. The speech was a masterclass in strategic communication. It resonated deeply with the audience, generating significant positive media coverage, focusing on the esteemed general's powerful advocacy for veterans' mental health and fair treatment. Veterans groups across the country amplified her message. Critically, the speech put state-level departments of corrections and justice systems across the country on notice, implicitly highlighting the potential for negative national scrutiny. If veterans, especially those with documented trauma, were perceived as being mistreated within their facilities, the indirect pressure on the officials overseeing Oakhaven and David's case mounted significantly. Combined with the relentless legal pushback from the specialized inmate advocacy lawyers challenging the flimsy disciplinary report against Anya, the external heat became too uncomfortable for the state doc. Weeks later, after an internal administrative review likely expedited by pressure from above, the disciplinary charges against Anya Sharma for unauthorized practice of medicine and related offenses were quietly dropped due to insufficient evidence to meet the required burden of proof. General Sharma used her national platform and esteemed reputation to advocate powerfully for all veterans facing misunderstanding and inadequate support within the justice and correctional systems, indirectly creating the pressure that helped free Anya from the prison frame-up. Do you think public advocacy and raising national awareness by high-profile figures like General Sharma is an effective and legitimate tool against systemic injustice happening at state or local levels, even when they cannot intervene directly? In a specific case, comment number 1 with your opinion on this strategic approach. Anya was released from the crushing isolation of solitary confinement for the second time, returning to the harsh but marginally better environment of Oakhaven's general population. Anya is out of solitary again. Another internal setup thwarted thanks largely to her mother's tactical brilliance and refusal to be silenced. If you admire the general's strategic use of her platform and Anya's sheer endurance against these repeated attacks, please hit that like button and subscribe. But how will Judge Vance, a man clearly driven by bias and now twice frustrated in his attempts to break Anya inside prison, react to this public maneuvering and defeat? What vindictive counterattack might he launch next? Judge Theodore Vance was livid. General Sharma's strategic address and the subsequent national attention it garnered had forced the State Department of Corrections to overturn the seemingly airtight disciplinary charges against Anya. His attempt to definitively brand Anya as an incorrigible inmate, thereby torpedoing her appeal, had been publicly, albeit indirectly, thwarted. Worse, Benjamin Carter's relentless pursuit of the appeal, particularly focusing on the potentially perjured testimony of Brenda Riley, continued unabated, posing a direct threat to the original conviction Vance had so decisively handed down. Feeling cornered, his authority challenged both legally and politically, Judge Vance lashed out with the vindictive fury of a man whose power was threatened. His retaliation became less strategic, more personal, aimed at punishing not only Anya and her mother but also their lawyer, and anyone perceived as supporting them. His primary weapon remained his position on the bench. In the weeks following the reversal of Anya's prison charges, Judge Vance presided over several unrelated cases involving defendants who attempted to use PTSD or other significant trauma as mitigating factors in sentencing. His rulings in these cases became noticeably chillingly harsher. He delivered lengthy, moralizing lectures from the bench, publicly denouncing what he termed the fashionable trend of using past trauma as an excuse for present criminality. He handed down maximum sentences in cases where leniency might have been warranted, making pointed comments about the need for personal responsibility and the limits of judicial sympathy, clearly intending his words to echo far beyond his own courtroom, sending a chilling message to defense attorneys throughout the jurisdiction: bring a PTSD defense before Judge Vance at your peril. Simultaneously, Vance activated his network of influence within the local legal and business community to target Benjamin Carter directly. Suddenly, Carter found his small but respected law practice facing unusual headwinds. Anonymous negative reviews began appearing online, questioning his competence and ethics. Referrals from other local attorneys, previously a steady source of casework, seemed to dry up overnight. He heard whispers through the grapevine that certain influential figures connected to Judge Vance were subtly suggesting to potential clients or larger firms that associating with Carter, the lawyer aggressively challenging a sitting judge and powerful interests, might be professionally disadvantageous. It was a campaign of quiet professional sabotage designed to isolate Carter, damage his reputation, and perhaps pressure him financially into dropping Anya's increasingly troublesome case. The attacks against General Isabella Sharma also intensified, reaching a new potentially career-threatening peak. Building on the initial IG complaint, anonymous sources now leaked more specific, damaging allegations to national media outlets known to be critical of the current military leadership or president. Hayes's administration. These leaks included distorted accounts of command decisions General Sharma had made years prior, internal budget documents presented out of context to imply financial mismanagement under her command, and even fabricated rumors about conflicts, with subordinates designed to paint her as a divisive or ineffective leader. Calls for her resignation or at minimum suspension, pending a full congressional investigation, grew louder, amplified by political opponents eager to exploit the controversy. General Sharma found herself mired in defending her decades-long, distinguished career against a relentless barrage of calculated smears, requiring countless hours with Army lawyers and public affairs teams, diverting precious energy from supporting Anya's appeal. Judge Vance, unable to directly stop the appeal or silence the general's national voice entirely, seemed determined to inflict maximum pain and pressure on everyone involved, hoping to force a collapse through attrition, intimidation, or by destroying the credibility of Anya's advocates. Marcus Jones and General Sharma recognized these escalating attacks for what they were, the desperate flailing of a cornered antagonist. Yet the pressure was immense, the fight now consuming their professional lives on multiple fronts. Anya, still incarcerated hundreds of miles away at Blackwater, received filtered updates from Carter during brief, difficult calls, feeling the weight of the attacks on her mother and her lawyer, adding another layer of guilt and despair to her own struggle for survival and justice. The judge's vindictiveness seemed boundless, his abuse of power extending far beyond his own courtroom. Benjamin Carter, reeling from the coordinated attacks on his own professional reputation and the escalating pressure on General Sharma, found Judge Theodore Vance's vindictive actions increasingly disproportionate. While judicial bias clearly played a role in Anya Sharma's initial harsh sentence, Vance's subsequent behavior, his blatant obstruction, his enabling of prison setups, his personal retaliation against anyone supporting Anya, suggested something more than just garden variety prejudice or a bruised ego. It felt like the panic of a man desperate to keep a lid on something much bigger. Carter decided to shift a portion of his investigative focus away from just Anya's specific case file towards Judge Vance's broader judicial record and reputation, searching for a pattern, a motive, anything that could explain the judge's extreme, almost reckless, determination to ensure Anya remained imprisoned and discredited. He started by systematically analyzing Vance's sentencing history over the past decade, particularly in cases involving minority defendants, female defendants, and those citing mental health or trauma as mitigating factors. He enlisted the help of a legal data analysis firm known for working on civil rights cases. While individual rulings could be debated, the aggregate data began to paint a disturbing picture. Defendants represented by public defenders received statistically significantly longer sentences from Vance than those with private counsel for similar offenses. Black defendants, especially black women, consistently faced harsher judgment and skepticism from Vance regarding mitigating circumstances compared to their white counterparts. Cases involving claims of PTSD or significant trauma were frequently met with dismissive language or outright rejection of expert testimony by Judge Vance. The data suggested a pattern, but lacked the definitive proof of intentional bias. The real breakthrough came, as it often does in such cases, from someone on the inside finally reaching a breaking point. A former assistant district attorney who had worked under DA Robert Miller for several years before leaving for private practice contacted Carter anonymously through a secure encrypted channel. This former prosecutor, let's call her Ms. Davies, confessed she had long been troubled by Judge Vance's courtroom conduct and his apparent collusion with Miller, particularly in cases involving defendants Vance clearly disdained. The relentless attacks on General Sharma and the obvious frame-ups against Anya had finally pushed Davies' conscience too far. After Carter meticulously verified her identity and established secure communication protocols, Davies provided explosive information. She testified, initially in a protected affidavit, that she had personally witnessed Judge Vance making explicitly racist and sexist remarks about defendants, including black female veterans, during off-the-record discussions in chambers. She described instances where Vance pressured prosecutors, including herself, to offer unfairly harsh plea deals to minority defendants or to withhold borderline exculpatory evidence. Most damningly, she produced copies of internal memos and email exchanges she had preserved from her time in the DA's office, communications between Judge Vance's chambers and DA Miller's senior staff, including Miller himself, regarding other cases which demonstrated a clear, long-standing pattern of improper coordination, strategy discussions, and biased commentary that mirrored the ex parte communications Vance likely engaged in during Anya's trial, even if those specific emails remained unrecovered. This wasn't just about Anya's case anymore. Davies's testimony and documentation painted a picture of Judge Theodore Vance as a jurist who routinely violated ethical standards, harbored deep-seated prejudices, and potentially conspired with the DA's office to secure convictions and harsh. Sentences against defendants he personally disfavored, particularly black individuals, and those challenging his worldview. It explained his fury at General Sharma's intervention. It threatened to expose his entire corrupt reign. It explained his desperation to silence Anya and discredit her lawyer and mother. Benjamin Carter now held evidence far more powerful than just proof of a Brady violation or sentencing disparity in one case. He had credible, documented evidence of a pattern of judicial misconduct and bias potentially affecting countless cases decided by Judge Vance over years. He immediately shared this explosive information securely with General Sharma. They both understood its significance. This could not only guarantee Anya's exoneration on appeal, but could and should lead to Judge Vance's removal from the bench and a full-scale investigation into the integrity of the local justice system under his tenure. The final appeal. Hearing, now just days away, transformed in Carter's strategy from merely seeking justice for Anya to potentially exposing a far deeper corruption. The stakes were higher than ever, but finally they had the weapon they needed. The final hearing before the State Appellate Court panel convened under an atmosphere thick with anticipation and barely concealed animosity. The courtroom buzzed with energy. Reporters filled the press benches. Veterans advocates sat alongside. General Isabella Sharma in the gallery, and Anya Sharma's face, weary but resolute, watched intently from the video monitor linked to Blackwater Penitentiary. Benjamin Carter stood before the three appellate judges, ready to deliver his culminating argument. He began by systematically dismantling the state's original case, presenting the compelling evidence that the prosecution's key witness, Brenda Riley, had likely perjured herself due to personal animosity and that her testimony was contradicted by verifiable records. He then reintroduced the crucial context of Anya's combat experience, her PTSD, her moral injury, presenting expert psychiatric evaluations obtained despite Judge Vance's obstruction, arguing powerfully that these factors negated the necessary criminal intent for the felony conviction. But Carter saved his most explosive evidence for last. "Your Honors," he stated, his voice resonating with controlled indignation, "this case represents more than just a potential wrongful conviction based on flawed evidence and ignored mitigating circumstances. We have uncovered substantial, corroborated evidence provided by a former assistant district attorney with first-hand knowledge, demonstrating a disturbing and long-standing pattern of judicial bias and misconduct by the trial judge, Judge Theodore Vance." He proceeded to lay out the evidence provided by the whistleblower, Ms. Davies, documented instances of Judge Vance making racist and sexist remarks in chambers, evidence of him pressuring prosecutors in other cases involving minority defendants, and, crucially, proof of improper communications designed to disadvantage defendants who raised issues of mental health or trauma. This wasn't merely judicial error in Specialist Sharma's case, Carter argued forcefully. It was the predictable result of a pattern of prejudice that has likely corrupted numerous outcomes in Judge Vance's courtroom over many years. Specialist Sharma wasn't just denied consideration. She was judged by a magistrate whose impartiality was fundamentally compromised from the start. The impact on the appellate judges was visible. Their expressions grew sterner, their note taking more intense. ADA Robert Miller, arguing for the state, seemed unprepared for this direct assault on Judge Vance himself. He stumbled through his rebuttal, resorting to procedural objections about the admissibility of the evidence concerning Vance's pattern, attacking the credibility of the unnamed whistleblower, and falling back on weak arguments about the sufficiency of the original trial evidence against Anya, largely ignoring the powerful evidence of perjury against Riley and the context of Anya's trauma. His defense felt thin, desperate. During a brief mid-hearing recess, D.A. Miller received a frantic encrypted message on his burner phone, clearly from or on behalf of Judge Vance, who must have been receiving real-time updates from an ally in the courtroom. The message was short, panicked and unambiguous. Offer the defense a deal, any deal, to make this stop. Offer time served, a misdemeanor plea, expungement after probation, whatever Carter wants for Sharma, provided the appeal is dropped immediately, and all complaints or evidence regarding Vance himself are permanently withdrawn and sealed. Miller, sweating slightly despite the courtroom's air conditioning, intercepted Carter as the lawyers prepared to return. He relayed the offer quickly, his voice low, avoiding eye contact. "Look, Carter," Miller muttered, "let's end this. Time served for Sharma. Plead to a lesser misdemeanor, record sealed eventually. She walks out today. All we ask is the appeal is withdrawn and any unrelated matters concerning judicial conduct are dropped. It's the best deal she'll ever get." Carter listened impassively, then used his own secure channel to relay the offer instantly to Anya via the video link equipment. Anya listened, her expression unreadable for a moment. Freedom today, walk away from Blackwater, put this nightmare behind her, but at the cost of silencing the truth about Judge Vance, letting him potentially continue victimizing others. Her jaw tightened. "No," her voice came back, clear and strong despite the prison connection. "Absolutely not. Tell him we'll see this through. Tell him the truth matters more." Carter relayed the rejection to Miller, whose face fell. "Your client's making a mistake," Miller hissed before retreating. The final arguments concluded shortly after the recess. The appellate judges listened intently, their faces betraying little, though they directed several sharp, probing questions at Miller regarding the ex parte email evidence from Part 11, assuming Carter also presented that, and the newly alleged pattern of bias. Finally, the presiding judge addressed the courtroom. "This court has heard extensive arguments and reviewed voluminous records in this deeply troubling case. We have considered the original conviction, the sentence, the supplemental evidence regarding witness credibility, the defendant's service record and medical evaluations, and the serious allegations raised concerning the conduct of the trial judge. We will take this matter under advisement and issue our written opinion in due course. Court is adjourned." The judges rose and filed out, leaving the courtroom suspended in a state of high tension. Vance's final corrupt gambit, an attempt to buy silence with a plea deal, had failed, perhaps even further solidifying the judge's perception of his guilt. Everything now rested on their final deliberation. The state appellate court did not keep Anya Sharma, General Sharma, or Benjamin Carter waiting long. Their written opinion, issued just 3 days after the tense final hearing, was a stunning and comprehensive victory, far exceeding a simple reduction in sentence. The panel unanimously voted to vacate Anya Sharma's original felony conviction entirely. Their reasoning was multi-layered and scathing towards the lower court. They cited the compelling evidence presented by Carter, demonstrating that the state's key witness, Brenda Riley, had likely committed perjury, fueled by personal animosity. They acknowledged the trial court's fundamental error in failing to give appropriate weight to the extensive, documented evidence of Anya's combat-related PTSD and moral injury, particularly as it related to the crucial element of criminal intent. Most significantly, the appellate judges addressed the evidence of Judge Theodore Vance's pattern of bias and improper conduct. While stopping short of making formal findings of corruption outside their appellate scope, they included sharp language criticizing the appearance of deep-seated bias and troubling procedural irregularities in Vance's handling of the trial, specifically referencing the ex parte communication evidence, assuming it was formally presented or strongly alluded to based on whistleblower Davies' info. They formally referred Judge Vance's conduct during the Sharma trial, along with the supporting evidence submitted by Carter, to the State Commission on Judicial Conduct for immediate investigation. The ruling strongly suggested that retrying Anya on the original charges would face insurmountable obstacles, effectively signaling to District Attorney Robert Miller that the case was dead. The fallout was swift. Faced with public disgrace, a scathing appellate rebuke, and an imminent, unavoidable investigation by the Judicial Conduct Commission, Judge Theodore Vance tendered his immediate resignation from the bench, ending his long, controversial judicial career in shame. D.A. Miller, his office implicated in both the likely perjury of its key witness and potentially improper communication with the now disgraced judge, quietly filed paperwork declining to refile charges against Anya Sharma. He himself faced an internal review and likely disciplinary action from the State Bar Association, significantly damaging his political ambitions. Anya received the news from Marcus Jones via a secure video call within the stark confines of Blackwater Penitentiary. Vacated. Exonerated. Free to go. The words barely registered at first, sounding distant, unreal after months spent fighting just to survive each day. The release process was a blur of paperwork and bureaucratic procedure. But hours later, Anya walked out of the main gates of Blackwater, not as inmate Sharma, but as specialist Anya Sharma once more, taking hesitant steps into the overwhelming brightness of freedom. Waiting for her, just as she had been waiting outside the courtroom months earlier, was General Isabella Sharma, her mother. Their embrace this time was fierce, desperate, releasing months of pent-up fear, anger, and love. Marcus Jones stood by, allowing them the moment, a quiet smile of deep satisfaction on his face. The journey back to civilian life was not easy. Anya was free, legally vindicated, but the trauma of her experience, the initial injustice, the horrors of prison, the targeted neglect of her mental health needs, the constant fight, had left deep, complex scars. She grappled with heightened anxiety, mistrust, and the disorienting feeling of reintegrating into a world that felt both familiar and alien after incarceration. Her relationship with her mother evolved. The shared ordeal forged a new level of mutual respect and understanding. Yet Anya also felt a stronger need to define herself outside the shadow of the general's powerful influence. As she continued intensive therapy, processing not only her combat trauma, but the added trauma of wrongful conviction and imprisonment, Anya began to reflect deeply on her experiences. She thought about the inadequate mental health care within the prison, the guards who dismissed her PTSD, the system that seemed designed to punish rather than rehabilitate, especially for those carrying invisible wounds. She realized that while her legal battle was won, thanks largely to her mother's resources and Carter's skill, the deeper issues remained unaddressed for countless others. It was during a conversation with other veterans in a support group that her new path began to crystallize. She heard stories mirroring her own, struggles with PTSD misunderstood by courts, lack of adequate mental health support in prison, the unique challenges faced by female veterans in navigating these systems. Her combat medic instincts, the ingrained drive to heal and support those in need, resurfaced with undeniable force. She decided her fight wasn't finished, it was just transforming. Instead of focusing solely on legal advocacy or policy reform, areas where Carter and her mother were already making strides, Anya chose a different path, one uniquely suited to her skills and experiences. Leveraging her background as an Army combat medic and her first-hand understanding of trauma within the correctional system, she dedicated herself to creating and facilitating programs focused on direct mental health support and healing for incarcerated veterans and those transitioning back into the community. She partnered with non-profit organizations, using her knowledge to help develop peer support groups specifically addressing moral injury within prison walls, advocating for trauma-informed care training for correctional staff and mental health providers working in prisons, and helping establish pilot programs offering alternative therapies like mindfulness and art therapy for incarcerated veterans struggling with PTSD. General Sharma wholeheartedly supported Anya's new mission, perhaps using her influence now, not to intervene in legal cases, but to help secure funding and institutional support for these vital healing programs. The final scene finds Anya months later, not in a courtroom or a political meeting, but sitting in a circle with a small group of female veterans inside a different correctional facility, facilitating a peer support session. Her voice is calm, empathetic, strong. She is sharing not just her medical knowledge but her lived experience, creating a space for healing where before there was only neglect. She had faced down a corrupt judge and a broken system, and while the legal victory was essential, her true triumph was found here, transforming her own scars into a source of strength and healing for others walking a similar path. Justice had opened the door, but healing, she realized, was the key to truly moving forward. Anya Sharma's story powerfully illuminates the complex intersection of challenges faced by veterans, particularly women of color, within the civilian justice system. It starkly demonstrates how judicial bias, potentially rooted in racist prejudice, sexism, and a profound lack of understanding about military trauma, can lead to devastating miscarriages of justice. Judge Vance's willful dismissal of Anya's combat medic service, her PTSD, and her moral injury highlights a critical systemic failure. The inability or unwillingness of some within the legal system to grasp the profound psychological impacts of war and service, especially when judging individuals from marginalized groups. The narrative underscores the critical need for trauma-informed practices throughout the justice system, from initial police contact through prosecution, defense, judicial review, and corrections. Anya's experience in prison, where her PTSD was exacerbated by neglect and her life-saving skills were weaponized against her, paints a grim picture of how correctional facilities can further traumatize vulnerable individuals instead of facilitating rehabilitation. General Sharma's intervention, while ultimately pivotal, again raises questions about equity, suggesting that achieving justice can sometimes depend on access to extraordinary resources and influence. However, the story's most resonant lesson may lie in Anya's ultimate path. While legal exoneration was essential, her decision to dedicate herself to healing, providing direct mental health support to fellow incarcerated veterans, offers a profound statement. It suggests that true justice involves not only correcting wrongs but also addressing the underlying wounds. Anya's transformation from victim to healer, leveraging her unique skills and experiences, demonstrates the potential for finding purpose and agency even after enduring profound systemic injustice and trauma. It champions a form of advocacy focused on restoration and peer support, a vital complement to traditional legal and political reform efforts. Anya's journey highlights the crucial need for our justice and correctional systems to better understand and accommodate veterans struggling with PTSD and moral injury. Do you feel enough is being done to support veterans facing legal challenges, especially women veterans of color? And what does Anya choosing healing advocacy over purely legal battles tell us about the different paths to finding justice and purpose after trauma? Share your thoughts with us. We value your perspective. Comment number 1. If you believe trauma-informed, training should be mandatory throughout the justice system. Or comment number 2, if you think peer support programs like Anya's are the most critical need. Your input contributes to vital conversations. If Anya's resilience and her commitment to healing inspired you, and if you stand for fair treatment for all veterans, please show your support with a like. Subscribe for more stories that explore justice in all its complexities, and share this video to help raise awareness. Thank you for watching. May we all work towards greater understanding and support for those who have served, both during and after their time in uniform.